Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance if you can.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. Tonight's meeting's being recorded live for the CNET YouTube channel. I know Ms. Hartle had a proposed amendment to the agenda. If she would announce it now, please.
Yes, I do, Mr. Chair. I would like to move to add an agenda item, preferably
at the EMS. You can get more information from the Facebook page or by calling the station or even contacting me. All this will be posted on Facebook and the website soon, and there will be flyers in the township building. Once I get them out, Amy can share them to the township's website too. On October 29th, from 9 a.m. until 1 p.m., there will be another CPR and AED class at the station. EMS members receive a 10% discount. Contact the station for reservations. This is for healthcare professionals and the public. As part of the community outreach and as a benefit of membership, there will be another wellness seminar on October 29th at 6:30. Members can attend any of these for free. This month's topic is avoiding scams. Reservations are not necessary but preferred. The annual soup and sandwich sale will be held all day on Election Day at the Halfmoon Township building and at Halfmoon Christian Fellowship. Since it was so successful last year, we are once again having a Christmas wreath and swag sale. Details are on the Facebook page. Get your orders in quickly. Here's a reminder, look for your EMS membership envelopes in your mailbox soon. Please be generous and show you're committed to the continued success of your EMS. Finally, the Port Matilda EMS is desperately in need of volunteers. Please consider helping by being a van driver that takes patients to and from doctor's appointments, taking whichever trip fits your schedule, or as a van driver that handles hospital transports. You can even opt to be paid for that. Only a basic life course is required. This was a good moneymaker for the EMS when there were people willing to drive. Please see Wayne for more information. Currently, we have very few volunteers for the various outreach and fundraising events throughout the year. Please consider lending a hand. There are lots of ways to help your EMS continue to serve us in Halfmoon Township. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comments? All right, seeing none, hearing none. Next up, approval of the minutes. This would be the minutes for September 12th, 2024. Do I hear a motion? And September 20th, 2024. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Do I hear a second? Moved and seconded. Any discussion by the board? Call for the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Approved. Next up, consent agenda. Ratification of the bills list for 9/10/24 through 9/20/24. $92,926.01 in the general fund, $2,542 in the open space preservation fund, and $2,400 in the park and rec fund, and also ratification of the bills 09/21/2024 and 10/7/2024. The general fund amounting to $78,987.98. Open space fund, the amount of $100. Park and rec fund, the amount of $3,786.52. Do I hear a motion to approve? Do I hear a second? Any discussion by the board? Call for the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Next up, Center Region Council of Governments 2025 Preliminary Budget Municipal Review. You're on, or somebody's on.
Can I do it from there, or?
Well, it'd probably work better if somebody talked into the microphone. Then the TV people can figure it out.
You can both come up too, that's fine.
Yep,
Grab a
you're more than welcome.
Good evening. I'm Ben Estelle, the new Executive Director for the Center Region COG. And I'm Kimberly McMullen, the Finance Director.
And over the last about 4 to 5 weeks, we have been meeting with the Finance Committee to have our budget hearings for each of the agencies under the COG, which was then followed by a final decision and recommendation meeting, which went to the Executive Committee, which made a recommendation to the General Forum. And the General Forum took that motion up to send the summary budget out to all of our municipalities. You should have by now received a copy of the summary budget for your review, and we're happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Yeah, my first question is, how much money can we pare out of that budget?
We have pared out more this year in a very short period of time than probably any time recently. We are in the COG admin budget alone, we have zeroed out the fund balance to the tune of, I believe, a little over $92,000, and have done that in several of the other budgets as well. One of the biggest constraints that is hitting us right now is that health insurance costs have gone up extremely. So the estimate we were provided by our insurance carrier was 19.9% as an increase for the year. Yes.
That's outrageous.
Yeah. So a family plan for insurance, between the COGS portion and the employees portion, is now over $42,000 alone.
But that's something that should be expected. Insurance rates are going up, and all kinds of filling of positions. I feel that there needs to be a rebalance, and I think we talked about it, rebalancing of resources to meet changing needs. And instead of just adding positions, that was my concern about that. And then there's other things like hybrid vehicles. I mean, I agree with hybrid vehicles, don't get me wrong, because I drive one. But there's a difference between plug-ins and standard hybrids. And with plug-ins, you need an infrastructure to support it. And in this budget, it's $100,000 for charging stations for the hybrid vehicles. And they're also more expensive than a standard hybrid. And I had questioned that in the meetings because I think there was a shortage of one vehicle in code administration. They needed an additional plug-in escape and a pickup truck. So, in other words, money management says if I need 7 vehicles, but if I buy this kind, I can only get 6. Well, maybe I have to rethink that. And I just don't see the constraints. Spending fund balance is fine, but that doesn't speak to spending. That speaks to sources of revenue. So instead of being more conservative on the spending end, you're basically eating up fund balance, and it's all from the same pot, basically. But I just those were my suggestions.
Completely understand that.
But Ben, and I don't want to qualify what I say by the fact that you did not come into your position until August.
Yeah, I've been here 7 weeks as of this week.
So I want to qualify everything I'm saying with that.
One of the things that we've already started working to communicate, and we started with the Finance Committee on this, is that we certainly changed the way that we were presenting information this year during the budget process. For each of the agencies, every agency director was given the instruction that they were not to sell anything to our membership, and they did not do so. They presented options for services that had been requested of the COG. When I spoke to our code director specifically about the vehicles, and he said he's happy to have his employees drive Hondas, Toyotas, Fords, Chevys, whichever ones that are made available to them. But it is our membership that drives what we do, and there have been requests and demands put on the COG to operate in a certain way and to offer certain sustainability options for those things, which is why they've looked at those. Those are certainly conversations to continue to have, to look at different options for the future. But for the moment, the way that we are operating, we'll continue to operate. We are a service organization, and we are listening to the services that are requested of us and providing options on how we can provide those services. But the COG is not going to come to our municipalities and say, this is the only car we can drive.
No, right. Gotcha.
It is going to be something, it's going to take some time to get through and to understand the needs balance the needs of all 6 communities for those types of issues. But something I've started very early on with to make sure that it is not COG trying to drive the finances of our municipalities, but COG responding to the needs and requests of our communities.
Okay.
Ben, if I'm looking correctly at the right column in this, on the summary page at the beginning, the overall increase from last year, from 2024, is 5.64%, which is within our COG-generated guidelines of trying to keep it below. I've heard different ones, 6 or 8%, but it's within a reasonable
Correct.
increase.
So
with COG, yeah.
the budget that COG presented was, I believe, at a 0.8.
In the very beginning, it was less than 2. Yes.
And it was the choices from the menu items of additional items that were requested. One of the biggest drivers this year is going to be the bathrooms for Hess Field.
Yes.
Yes, I've been hearing about those for 20 years, so.
Yes. That's a $600,000 project. COG is using $295,000 in fund balance for that. But that's still another 305. That's over 3% alone of that increase just for that one project.
But if I do recall from being on the finance committee, we were closer to 7%. And then through the budget meetings, and by the time we got to the end, we're down to that 5.6. So that was, I think, a relatively quick drop, I felt, on our part. Now, this is my first time going through it, but I was very confident in our abilities to drop that to a more manageable
Certainly.
rate, I think. And I think it helped with a few other townships as well. Some of my concerns, I echo Mr. Cervello's comments in terms of the electric hybrid vehicles. I've talked to a couple people about that. Again, I'm for sustainability, but I think a lot of our costs for that are significant and they're upfront costs. And I know we've had that conversation in our finance committee about the infrastructure that needs to be put in
Yes.
for those plug-in vehicles. And so again, that should be code's 100% self-funding. And so there's conversations about having that cost go to code. But again, that's all up for discussion. But I do think that is something that we need to look at more, because I agree, there's multiple vehicles out there we could be driving. So what's the most economical vehicle that we can have that's still functional for the need, and maybe not have the infrastructure costs to that level that we have. So I think that's a continued discussion. I do want to point out for my colleagues here that, just to note that a lot of the budgets this year and the cuts that we made and were able to make were because we're spending out a number of fund balances across the board for the budget, which is good for this year. But the problem is it may come back to bite us in a year or two because we don't have those fund balances. So we need to be aware of that so that we don't come back next year and say, well, wait a minute here, why did we do that last year? But, there's a reason we're doing it this year, but just know there may be a downside to that.
That's
in
correct.
a year or two.
Well, that's my point. There's cutting spending, and then there is reducing the percentage of growth using fund balance. And are they true cuts? Because, like you said, using fund balance is not a sustainable model
Right.
for, controlling let's say, increases in the budget. Okay, but, having a more effective or more efficient management style to use your resources, let's say you start out the year, you have X resources based on how much money you have in your budget. And to be able to manage those better, perhaps, to contain the growth in spending, because you have to anticipate things like insurance, like something else that's the other shoe's gonna drop, and you're gonna need, so there's contingency. You have to have contingency built in, and we've had these discussions, because I was in the finance committee last year, and but I saw a lot of it driven by, a list of things that people want, instead of what are the priorities, what does, and how can we rebalance or rebalance our resources to meet those needs, okay, and prioritize them. Maybe some things aren't necessary. Maybe some things can wait. The Hess Field thing still, that it is $600,000 for, I think it amounts to a restroom. Is there going to be some kind of a concession? Is that part of the facility? That's
I don't-
not part of the 600,000.
No, that
That's
was
not.
The 600,000 is just restrooms.
It is just
That's-
restrooms, and there was a conversation about that, about adding to the footprint of it, since we already have the structure going in. But the problem is this is a pre-bought structure. We're not building the structure, so it's a
Yeah.
prefabricated, so it's coming in, so you can't really just add on to it. So the $600,000 is just for the
So
bathrooms.
Right.
it's the bathroom and the accessibility piece. So
In
there's
between.
accessibility,
Yeah.
parking.
I understand
Yes.
buildings.
The- those-
Yes.
But it really surprised me how expensive it was. That building how big of a building is it?
I can't remember off the top of my
20,
head.
28 by 21, something like
So,
that in terms
It's like
of.
500 square feet
Yes.
for $600,000. That's a lot of money.
Well, but you think about the infrastructure that needs to go in for restrooms. You got water,
I
sewer,
did.
plumbing, so
I do.
that's a significant, and plus it's the parking area.
Yes.
Or part of the parking area, so yeah.
So-
And then if I recall, I don't have my full notes with me tonight, is we're pulling 300,000 of that. Is that from fund balance?
295,000. So one of the things that the finance staff did is they did a great job this year of kind of unwinding a lot of the fund balances that have existed in some of our agencies, and Parks was one of those, where there had been requests for vehicles that came over a couple different years, and because of delays from COVID and the fulfillment of orders, the same vehicles were funded multiple times. And so fund balance existed for that duplication. That is being applied to this project. In addition, the Parks crew said that they could go without a couple vehicles this year. And Tammy, I think that was one of your suggestions that took another 95,000. So there was 200 in existing fund balance, then 95,000 that was dedicated to a couple vehicles that the Parks crew will put towards this project, meaning that the municipal contribution for this year goes from 600 down to 305. Because
I think that's how we
And-
ended up at 295 with
Yes.
the inclusion of that.
and we want to be clear, that is 295,000 of existing municipal contributions
Correct.
that is going into that.
How many miles do you put on the cars before you get rid of them? I mean, what's the run length like?
I can't tell you that number just yet. I can tell you that we are disposing of, I believe it's 8 total vehicles next week.
Because
And one of those was a 2002. I think another, probably 8 to 10 years is about the
Average, probably.
They were
well,
older.
that was the newest of the vehicles that we are getting rid of at that point. So we're getting at least 8 to 10 years out of,
Well, I
out of those.
had a buddy who always bought Toyotas because he knew they could run them 300,000 miles without having a problem. So, I mean, it depends on what you buy as well.
It does.
And the battery cars are not gonna last like that.
And the reality is even those old Toyotas don't run 300,000 miles anymore. Just nothing does anymore.
But the point
unfortunately.
is, some vehicles you run for a long time. Depends on the kind of vehicle that it is.
What you're using it for.
I mean, you could have fire trucks some municipalities have
Yep.
fire trucks that are
20
20,
years.
30 years old. On the other hand, if you're on the road all the time, you might run 300,000, you might get 250,000 miles on a vehicle that's 7 years old.
And the The other issue, for any municipal-based organization that you have when it comes to your fleet is that we typically only put short miles onto our vehicles. We do not get very many highway miles at all. Highway miles are much easier on a vehicle than the short miles
Right.
are, and we only get those short miles. So
That is a factor.
we
It's a long
do
stop
more
and go.
damage than the typical driver does just based on the work we do.
But I think salaries and benefits, or wages and benefits, compensation is going to be their biggest factor. That's going to be the biggest budget line item at the COG, or with any organization.
Yeah,
It is
we
always
actu-
the largest.
We actually had a couple conversations about that in terms of, I think it was the parks person, where we looked at the salary dollars and then the compensation package, and the compensation package was like, 200% times the actual salary. And so that was, but then that was explained in terms of the healthcare. It's no longer, 33% over the salary. It's actually a big
Correct. So-
chunk plus.
Yeah, and that came from the forms that were used for the program plan, which are great for pre-budgeting kind of factors. And I believe that position was listed as like a Class 9 employee originally.
And they dropped it.
And then they dropped it down to a Class 7 since then, which changes the salary, that changes your workers' compensation rate, changes your changes basically everything but healthcare.
Right.
It drops those rates all down. However, the program plan number, which is what was being budgeted originally, still had those older numbers in it. So
Yeah.
certainly a chunk was cut out. And we also budgeted for 9 months, knowing that they would not be hired at the beginning of the year.
Right.
So in future years, that'll be a
But
12
again,
month.
knowing that's gonna go up because it's
Exactly.
gonna be 12 months a year after that, yeah.
Well, I
There's two other things that were notable too in the conversations in larger chunks one is the movement to ClearGov, which isn't as big obviously as the Hess bathrooms, but we're still talking $36,000, $37,000 for that, which I think is necessary. So, but it's a big chunk. Again, it's ClearGov, it's moving to a software, if I'm correct. It's a software because Kim does currently a lot of manual entry into Excel spreadsheets for the budget. So I think that's a necessary thing, but it is a large chunk, depending on which way we go, which I think if we're gonna do it, we should go to the full route, is just so you know my support. And the other thing that was a big conversation, which we really didn't get a resolution on, is the parking lot, which includes, well, it's 130K, but we've also got infrastructure, which we talked about earlier with the plug-in vehicles, which maybe that should be a code expense.
So the infrastructure would be a code expense, and we also confirmed that code would be putting in an additional $50,000 to the parking lot project itself. And that is how the budget that you have is laid out.
Okay.
And that has been
So
confirmed.
they said that
Yes.
was okay. Yeah, so anyway, but those are other big chunks as well. There's a
And-
lot of little things that add up,
So
but
And we
we're
would
spending
only
down
do
our
those
reserve cash then,
together.
but
that's the biggest concern, is that
Yeah.
we're spending down that fund balance.
What is your total fund balance for this year, right now?
It depends on which agency. We
Well, let's, if
have,
it's added all up, all the fund balance total.
It should be, yes,
Do we have
there
that
should be a
total
fund
yet?
balance column here, and it should total at the bottom.
It's a significant amount of money.
Fund balance. So is that the fund balance column?
Yes.
There, and that's gonna be that number.
so should be about 9.6 million.
Total across all of our,
Yeah,
Across all the
so
agencies.
That's across all
departments.
agencies.
Yes.
Yes.
And that includes the enterprise agencies as well.
Yes, that is a little over 4 million in our capital. That's more than 2 million of that is fire capital for the future
Yeah.
vehicle purchases there. About 1 million in other, so that is our regional parks, unemployment, emergency management, and the insurance reserve. And then another 3.5 million in the enterprise accounts, so code. It's a good refresher for everybody. With our code agencies, because all of the permits have to come at the beginning. They essentially get paid for their inspections in advance. So they typically have a large fund balance, knowing that a project might take 2 to 3 years before they actually inspect it. Most of that has been paid for up front. And so we have to hold that fund balance to compensate for those future inspections. On the operating side, it's a little less than 1.5 million in fund balance.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I was gonna say something, I forgot.
Well, I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to that.
Well, and Ron, I think you're aware of this, that we're looking at, it's on the to-do list, to look at a process or a plan for fund balances. The problem is we cannot have one rule for fund balances that goes across the board, because there's different needs for different fund balances, like you said, with
Yes.
code and with the permits and stuff. That's a different kind of fund balance
Exactly.
than what we have for operating or the parks or whatever. So trying to look at what is a good plan for fund balances, but you gotta look at each of the budget categories separately so that we have
No,
something,
right.
because there's nothing in place now to say what
Correct.
should that fund balance be. But,
So Kim is finishing up the some of our other financial policies right now. She's sent those over to me this week for review, which will then be coming before the Finance Committee. And then after that, we will begin working on fund balance policies to start presenting those. I've already heard, because it was one of the first things I brought up, and I've already heard that this gets brought up every other year. We will actually be working on these. I expect that, by the middle of next year, we should have fund balance policies across the board.
Okay, good.
How many new employees, not replacing existing ones, but how many new employees positions are in that budget?
Just the one.
Yes, correct.
The new park
For
specialist.
next year, yeah.
Yes.
is the, I'm forgetting what it's, there's another position.
Facilities administrator.
No, it's,
That's being filled this year.
AmeriCorps position. Is that, isn't that,
That's the continuation of the existing program.
okay, because that's existing, so that's,
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
That's a renewal, because that one runs mid-year to mid-year.
Okay,
It is approved through the middle of next year already.
right,
This was seeking approval for the next cycle, which would
Okay.
go from the middle of 25 to the middle of 26.
And that's a. s-
and that's
not
being
a-
evaluated if we need a full-time person.
Correct. Well,
Or position.
to continue on with that AmeriCorps program.
Okay,
Right.
okay.
And that's not a very high cost
No.
program.
No.
so-
No,
No.
they're not staff.
Right, okay, thank you.
And the facilities administrator position was unfilled in the last year. So that was a vacancy that was filled just recently for this year, but we had budgeted for it over the last 2 years.
Right. Okay,
I know you're new here, but
Certainly.
I would recommend that maybe you take a look at, when these COG committees get together and they decide to do something that, as Ron stated earlier, you have the entire COG organization pick out 3 projects or 5 projects that they want to accomplish and try to stick to that. Because, and I know you have a tiger by the tail, but, I used to see it with the planning office. We get dumped so much stuff on the planners, they're going crazy trying to keep up with it, and they can't. So, we need to prioritize as elected officials what we want our COG to do for us and say, our target for 2025 is this. And then we don't keep adding to it, that we just say, let's get this done, and then we can talk about whatever's next for 2026.
One of my very early requests here is that we don't do anything more in the parks until we finish these projects that are already on the books and that those are paid for.
Good idea.
A lot of the projects that have been left hanging or are mid-process are problems because too much was put onto the staff to manage at one point in time. In my last community, when we did a strategic plan, we did an exercise with our elected officials to lay out our budget capacity for each year as well as our staff capacity for each year. We assigned values to every project and then told them everything has to align on both sides. You can't just outspend and get out of this, and you can't force everything on the employees to get out of it. even if you desire something, at times you're going to have to wait to make things work properly.
Good man.
Good.
I just want to say thank you to Kim. I mean, I know she spent endless
Yes.
hours on this, and I know it's my first time around, but I thought she did an exceptional job
I
with
agree.
this budget, and she had an answer for any time a question was asked. She had an answer, and if she needed a follow-up, she did a follow-up, but it was rare that she needed a follow-up, so she could answer things on the fly. Thank you. You did a great, great job, and I appreciate it, so. And thank you for stepping into the role.
Oh, my pleasure.
Not into the fire. So, but Kim, I agree. You made our job easy on the finance committee. You really did. You made our job easy, I thought, so,
Thank you.
yes.
Any
Thank
other
you.
supervisors have any questions?
No, just being on the finance committee in the past and going through all the papers and looking at the final product, this is much easier to read and understand and follow, and so,
Excellent.
yeah, so I go, Tammy, from looking at these in the past, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, and I hope you get the ClearGov, and that makes your life easier too. So,
Me too, thank you.
I was appalled when I heard you were manually entering numbers. I'm like, what?
Yeah,
Kind
it's
of
a
archaic the world are we in?
$30 million budget done in Excel.
Yeah, no. I mean, ooh, wow.
Good.
Well done, well done. Thank you.
Do you have any questions for us before you go?
None at this time. Separate from the budget, I look forward to getting to know each of you better. Please know that you can call me, talk about any issue that you have. One of the points I will be hammering is that we are a service organization, and that will be the focus. Is how we serve our communities.
Good.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks for coming in.
Great.
Our pleasure. Would you like us to stick around?
Not unless you want to.
I'm sure you have plenty to do, so, but, yeah.
I'd be out of here in a shot if it was me.
Yeah, you do not have to stick around, so,
So,
thank you very much.
Okay, 2025 Center County Liquid Fuels Grant. We have a possible motion of application requesting $20,000 for assistance with Smith Road berm project. Does anybody want to talk about that or make a motion?
I'm happy to make a motion, but I do want to talk about it. So is this just additional money for the current project going on?
Yes,
Yes.
it is.
Yeah, okay. Everybody was like dead silent?
Yeah, so,
Okay.
yeah, so really, I mean, as you all know, we're working on the Smith Road berm paving project, which is definitely a multi-year project. So really what we were doing is we were asking for permission to submit the Center County Liquid Fuels Grant for $20,000 going toward that project for next year. So it just to help our general fund with that.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Chuck, is there a limit on the application in terms of dollars?
I'm not aware of a limit. This is more limited as to what we can accomplish in a year. So,
Well, I guess
That's the
That's the
biggest-
dollar
there,
limit.
it's
Okay.
also there.
Okay.
You're probably more likely to get something if you're not going for the sky.
Right, so,
So-
so Brett and I had worked out, and we were going to approach the board with a $40,000 figure for next year, working on this project. So our thoughts were that we would ask the county for 20,000, we could match the other, 20,000 of that, and be able to kind of help our general fund as we go through the year.
Is this a required matching or no? We're just gonna do that.
No, but we have seen historically, if you put your money where your mouth is, you tend to get better results.
Okay, so that'll be in the application
try
then
and-
that we're gonna make.
Yep,
Yes.
yep.
Okay.
Any other conversation?
Nope, not unless there's any other questions.
No. I'll move to approve submitting the 2025 Center County Liquid Fuels Grant application requesting $20,000 for assistance with the Smith Road berm project.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Moving second. Any other discussion by the board? Call for the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion approved. See how we do. Next up, letter of support for community solar. Do we have any kind of answer back on that yet?
Any answer? Well, we have a proposal here to send a letter to Senator Langerhoff, similar to the letter that COG sent him. Frankly, I think it's like redundant, because they, in general forum, 6 municipalities voted to send a
Do it,
letter.
yeah.
And that is us. I mean, I guess we could send another one. I don't really care. But I don't see the point myself, but.
I think
You know,
they're just asking for additional support to go along with a letter. And my understanding is, even though we would send a letter for support for the community solar, it doesn't mean that the solar panels would necessarily be in Center County or even in Halfmoon Township, like it could be somewhere else and you're getting the solar from it. Because everybody was kind of thinking, well.
Well, if it's a state program, yeah.
Yeah, the solar can come from wherever the panels are, so it doesn't mean that your neighbor's gonna put one in and you get the solar or whatever,
Right.
but, I mean, I don't see a harm in supporting it.
But I'm just saying, the general forum
Yeah,
approved sending a letter. I mean, and I think it ended up being unanimous. I can't remember now, but
but they're,
it's the same people.
Right.
It's this, so I don't care. So I'm neutral on it at this point, but I don't see any benefit. I don't see any drawback. It's just that we already sent them a letter through the COG. I mean, we are the COG. So,
Yeah, I'm kind of ambivalent about it.
but if
but
that's
it's
what we
not- I
want to
mean,
do, I'm
the
fine
only
with
effort
it.
that we have is typing up the letter and sending it,
That's it.
right?
We
So,
could
Yeah.
probably get a copy of what they sent too and just.
I think we
Oh, you already have a copy, so
that
pretty
draft, yeah,
easy
so,
for,
I
to
mean,
do.
The question is, do we want to do it or not? Really?
I'll move to approve drafting and sending a letter of support for HB 1842 to Senator Langerholt. Can't speak, so.
Do I hear a
sorry about
second?
Second.
Moved second. Any discussion by the board? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
that. Aye.
Aye.
I'm a no.
He's a no. Chuck's a no. 2 noes and 3 yeses, so.
That's just gonna make a bunch of little solar farms around if they do that stuff.
Yeah, well, I think they're gonna show up anyways, because we got one down in Warriors Mark we're already maybe gonna be dealing with.
It's
Well, what we find out is it'll be a utility and we have no control over
It's
it.
not the
anyways.
concept of solar, we already sent them a letter.
Yeah, COG already did.
Well,
And actually-
put them on their house, that's, that's
Yeah,
perfect.
well, I don't care
I'm not
about
against
that.
solar.
Right.
I'm just saying we don't need a bunch of mini solar farms
All over
around
the
the
place.
state, so.
Okay, next up is Ms. Hartle.
Yes, last night we had a Open Space Preservation Board meeting, and we had, several topics came up, and we were working on thinking like 5 years out, and where did we want to go recently, well, not recently, but the overall reason for the Open Space Board was with the lease, was to have properties in the lease that we would eventually be able to move to permanent preservation. And over the last few years, we've started looking in that direction. Because if they come out of the lease program, then we're further ahead because we're not paying the lease for 99 years if we're taking those that are in the program and permanently preserving. So the Open Space Board is focusing on permanent preservation. And in order to do that, not that we're not still going to look at leases, but to help support that, we wanted to take just a little break because there's 3 or 4 potential permanent ones in the queue, which we would know probably by about mid next year if any of those are going to come to fruition. And the reason we can't always tell ourselves is because we depend on partners to help preserve the properties. Like for Joanne Fisher's, we partnered 50-50 with the county preservation program, and the same with like Denny Thompson's. There was a partnership going on there, and so between Clearwater, Northwestern Conservancy, and the county, we hope for partnerships because that makes our dollars go a lot further in preserving these properties. So we're thinking that there is the potential that a few of these are going to come to fruition potentially next year, and then it would still take probably a good year until any funds were actually dispersed, because the more agencies you have working together, it just takes a little time, because I know it took a while to close on Joann's, even after we knew that we were gonna do the deal. So anyways, that being said, the thought was to help us prepare for that and also to invest our money a little further, which will be the next topic on the agenda, was to put a temporary hold on new lease applications. And that would go from now until, what did we have, September
September 1st.
September 1st
2025.
of 2025. And that's just to give us a little time to really focus, put a little more effort on the permanent aspect. see
You're
if
talking
any of
about the
these-
open space board concentrating
Yeah.
on that.
Yeah,
And it would take effect immediately
yes, any
until
applications,
September. Okay.
any applications currently in the queue would not be affected by this. They would go through the process.
How many do we have in the queue?
One.
So in September 2025, somebody comes in here, let's say next month or whatever, and they say we're interested, we would property until September 2025.
We
Is
would
what
not
you're
ex-
saying.
We would ask them to reapply
We-
on September 1st of 2025 for consideration.
And this is just for the 99-year lease.
Well, usually the people have to get in the lease program before they get a purchase.
No.
Well, usually they have, we'll put it that way.
Well,
Thompson.
Or haven't they?
there's a lot, I think, personally, I think there's a lot of issues with this program. But, that being said, we have a motion here to place a moratorium until September 1st, 2025. And we have one other motion here that we can address in a second. But that's the business of tonight.
That's all we're talking about tonight.
We have a lot of things I think we ought to be talking about with regard to this program. But tonight, we have two motions, and I think we ought to act on these motions.
Okay, and we can have more discussion, but I'll read out what the potential motion is here for this one. And it would be, I move to approve placing a moratorium on all new 99-year lease applications until September 1st, 2025.
That's your motion.
That's my motion.
That's your
Second.
motion.
And I'll second it.
And then we
Motion and
can
a
have
second.
more discussion?
Now we can have a
Any discussion by
discussion.
the board? Hearing none, call for the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion approved. Okay, September 1st, 2025 is the next submission date for new farms, if you're not already in the queue.
Or new land, whatever.
Yep. Open Space Preservation Board Certificate of Deposit recommendation. I know Brett was wrestling with this, but Patty, do you want to handle it, or?
Basically, yeah, Brett presented us last night at Open Space Board with different options, because our current funds are in an account with a decent interest rate, but it just went to variable. So with the way the proposed rate cuts that are coming, that's most likely going to go down. So we thought it would be best to take the money in anticipation of some of these preservations, but that'll still be potentially a year out, and leaving enough in the fund for regular operating expenses that we could put. So we went over looking at the different CD rates over periods of time for anywhere, out to a year. And we had a couple different proposals, but the one we settled on at the Open Space Board was to put $500,000 in a 12-month CD.
At what interest rate?
It was 4.25.
4.25%.
That was the best we could find, I guess.
One of the handier ones, yes.
Okay.
Because
And
as everyone's projecting this decrease, your CD rates are starting to
Well,
drop.
till
quickly.
November, and then it'll change.
What bank would it be with?
First National Bank.
Do they have a 9-month CD?
They do, but it's actually at a lower interest
It is
rate.
lower,
They
okay.
want to try and either tie you up very short.
Right.
The highest percentage was a 3-month,
12.
but that doesn't guarantee you much. In 3 months, we don't
We
know.
don't make much.
This was your best average.
And how many months is this one?
A 12-month.
12 months.
And
What
we
was
would-
our
That's
rate
reasonable.
with the account that's now moving to variable? What's the rate?
It
that's-
is currently setting at 3.4001%.
So we're better off.
Yeah, just look
Correct.
at, for 12 months, we're better off, yeah.
And we would.
We don't need it for at least
Yeah,
12
we
months,
won't.
right?
Right.
Right,
So
that's
that
the
makes sense to
theory.
do it.
And we would earn a little over, what, 21,000?
Yep, just a little over 21,000 in interest.
Right.
Now, do I hear a motion?
I'll move.
Motion, how about a second?
Second.
Moving second, any discussion by the board? Call for the question, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None? We'll let the audience clear there for a
What's
second.
the matter, fire?
Oh, it's the lights. It's the northern
Oh,
lights.
the
I'm
light.
like, what is going on?
Okay,
I'm like, what is going on?
something's happened.
Okay.
Doggone it, I'm sitting here.
All
Sorry,
right.
did we get all the votes in on that, Dave? I know-
Yeah,
Should've told me
we're
that.
covered.
Okay.
We're good.
Shouldn't have told me that.
Sorry, Mr.
Okay.
Chair.
Possible purchase of backhoe thumb. Chuck, I know this is you.
Yep, so of course, we're always trying to do more with less people. So I was just approaching the board to ask for their consideration to purchase the hydraulic thumb for the back of the backhoe. Of course, obviously the new backhoe, which will in turn help with a lot of different heavy lifting and removing down trees from roadways, clearing brush, as well with, riffraff events, stuff like that.
That's essentially, it's like a hand, right?
It's basically a hydraulic claw,
Okay.
yes. It'll just attach
Pick up
to-
logs and all
Just
kinds of
making
stuff.
sure.
No, it's a good device to have.
I think it is. I mean, the more, obviously, the more you look around and you're always trying to think of worst case scenarios that can happen. I mean, obviously, we have to try to think for that kind of stuff. If we would have some kind of storm event where it knocks down a bunch of trees, this is, obviously a tool to go in and open roadways. There's so many things it can be used for.
What are we doing now? If that were to happen now, like what
Chainsaw and
manual power?
yeah, I mean, I still take the backhoe out, but it's chainsaw and then push them off the road, basically. So
It's a safer way to do it too.
I feel it is, yeah.
Do I hear a motion?
Hell of a lot more efficient.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Moving second, any discussion by the board? Call for the question, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All right. I know how important that is, because that's a really great thing and you watch them work, so.
It is, yeah. Yep.
Okay, anybody got any township reports they want to relay? Out loud, I guess.
I don't.
About authority boards and committee reports.
Just no more than the ones of submitted.
No, we have not had a human resources committee in a while, and of course, finance, you got that on the budget today.
Yep. All right, we're gonna hold an executive session, we're gonna adjourn the meeting and everybody can go home or whatever. Hold an executive session to discuss a legal matter, it's gonna be short, but we just need to apprise the elected officials on a legal issue. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do I hear a second? Moving second, all those in favor say aye. 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 Adjourn, 7:00.